So our next guest presenter is EDD Director Nancy Farias. Nancy Farias has served as Chief Deputy Director of External Affairs Legislation Policy at the California Employment Development Department since 2020. Ms. Farias was Director of Government Relation at SAIU Local 1000. How do I know that? That's my union. From 2017 to 2020. She was Deputy Chief of Staff in the Office of Senator Henry Stern from 2016 to 2017, and a District Director at the Office of Assembly Member Mike Ghetto from 2015 to 2016. She held many leadership positions, including Deputy Secretary of Legislation at the Government Ops Agency, Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs at CalHR. Ms. Farias was a Senior VP at the law firm of Smith, Ruddock and Hayes, and a Boston associate at the Boston law firm of Wolkin Pascuzzi, LLP. Ms. Farias earned a Master's of Science degree in Political Science from Suffolk University and a law degree from Suffolk Law School. Welcome, Director Farias. The floor is yours, and thank you so much for waiting.
Thank you so much. God, all that sounds so boring, all that stuff there. Good morning. It's so nice to be here. Bobby, thank you so much for asking me to come and say a few words. Again, Nancy Farias, the Director of EDD. And I'll reiterate some of what Bobby said, but I've been director about 6 weeks now, but I've been with EDD since September of 2020. And as such, I thought what I would do is just introduce myself a bit, tell you a little bit about who I am, but trust me, I am very boring, and then just give some very brief highlights, as to some of the recent EDD actions. And then I thought I would leave the rest of the time for something much more interesting, which is to answer questions and to hear your thoughts on some of the actions of EDD, I guess. So just a little bit about myself. When I was in kindergarten, no, I'm just kidding. I am from Massachusetts. I did start my career there. I went to college there, as Bobby mentioned, grad school, law school, and I was a lobbyist, practiced law. And that stuff is all on my resume. And that's like the really, really boring basic part of me, right? What's not on my resume is that I understand disability firsthand. When I'm going to get choked up here, but when I was about 15 or so, my mom had a surgery that went wrong. Some of you who may have had surgery know that there's always a certain risks to surgery, really, really low percent of the population, so low that most people sort of disregard it, and that's the right thing to do, right? Well, my mom was one of the very, very, very few people who had complications from surgery. And without getting into a whole lot of detail, she worked in a factory making curtains in my hometown of Fall River, Massachusetts. And she went back to work for a bit and she couldn't stand, as was required by the job. And so under what I assume now, this again was long time ago, but under what I assume now was what we would call a reasonable accommodation, they allowed her to sit. Well, she couldn't sit for long and she couldn't stand for long, so she ended up going out on disability. And now that I am a lot older, I realized how young I was at 15, and I remember that she walked with a limp and still does. And I was kind of embarrassed by it, to be honest. And what I didn't think about at the time was that so was she, most likely, right? So, but it became a part of her and who she was, and it still is. And to be honest, I don't get to see my parents a whole lot because they still live in my hometown and I'm out in California now. I forget about her disability. And I really don't think of my mom as disabled. And so I called her this morning before this conference and asked her if she also forgets about her disability. We are Irish, and it is St. Patrick's Day. And when I called her, it was close to noon. She was with my dad and her father, who's my 98-year-old grandfather. And I think they were having a little bit of fun. So I'll spare you most of the very interesting conversation that we had. But in a nutshell, when I asked her, she said, "Nancy, you know how you have a little bit of that sassy attitude?" And I was like, "What is she talking about?" She said, "Well, that's just who you are, right? It's just part of you." And to be honest, I don't think of it as a disability. I just think about it as a part of who I am. But that's not to say that she's went on to say that's not to say that she's not annoyed that she can't wear normal shoes and march in the St. Patrick's Day parade anymore. So while I guess everyone does have their priorities, and hopefully not everyone has a sassy daughter like me, apparently, what I took from that is that she considers it part of who she is and not necessarily a stigma that she lives with. And I hope that she is not the only one that feels that way. So thank you for inviting me here to remind me about that, because I did forget, as I said, and it was good to talk to my mom about it. But enough about my mom and more about me. When I came to California about 13 years ago, I was lucky enough, as Bobby mentioned, to represent the state employees through SEIU Local 1000. And I can't see everyone because I know not everyone is on screen, but I am sure I had the pleasure of working with some of you in one fashion or another. As Bobby mentioned, I worked at CalHR for a year or so before I went over to the Government Operations Agency when it was created. And when I was at CalHR, although it was short, it was only about a year, I did work on some disability issues as it related to hiring and some changes to the LEAP program. It was a long time ago now, but I do remember it. And as Bobby mentioned, I worked in the legislature in Massachusetts and also here in California. I guess I have done kind of a lot. While I was working at SEIU Local 1000, that was very fulfilling for me. That's how I remember Bobby. We did a lot of great things together back when Local 1000 was in a little bit less turmoil. It was very fulfilling. And, EDD is also very fulfilling, and it's also very challenging. And again, I'm from Boston, so I like a good, solid, old-fashioned challenge. And EDD has always had challenges, and like everything, the pandemic exacerbated those challenges. And for EDD, it especially brought to light the many challenges that we have serving our disability community in particular. And, my philosophy has always been, once you know about challenges, you really don't have an excuse to not fix them to the best of your ability. So although I'm certain that no one would say that the pandemic was a good thing, I think at EDD, we have lots of lessons that we learned from the pandemic on ways in which we can improve service to all of our customers, and especially the disability community. One of the biggest challenges at EDD related to providing direct service to claimants, as might be expected. Individuals with disabilities were among the populations facing significant barriers to accessing EDD programs. And we quickly realized it became critical to employ a claimant-centered approach, which is what we have been doing since I've been here the past year and a half, and they have done since the pandemic. And a couple of things that I just want to highlight that we've done. We've facilitated access on a case-by-case basis for individuals with physical and mental disabilities who needed extra direct service. For example, customers with learning and information processing difficulties were assisted with assignment to seasoned agents who provided greater investments of time to assist. You may have heard a little bit in the press about our call center. We have different people with different abilities to service claimants. So we ensured that the disabled community had the level that they needed at that time. So agents now, of course, our agents now work remotely, and they were provided with TTY mobile phones to communicate with deaf and hard of hearing customers. We also employed greater inclusion of ASL, the American Sign Language, into language accessibility initiatives for limited English proficient customers. That was also one of the challenges that we had during the pandemic, was those of limited English proficiency. So we are focused on that 100% right now. Previously, there was much less recognition of American Sign Language in this regard, and all public contact staff received training on using California Relay Service. And also just internally at EDD, we promote LEAP hiring. EDD is one of the top departments in hiring persons with disabilities through the LEAP program. With our most recent mass hiring due to the pandemic, we employed hundreds of LEAP employment program representatives, which again, as I just mentioned for the call center, they have the most expertise and knowledge in helping claimants with complicated aspects of their UI claims. And we've also made some good gains in staff reasonable accommodations, I think, with more creative minds involved. We have a great EEO office. Unlike, I think, some departments, the EEO officer reports directly to the director's office. It's something we take very seriously, and it's a very high level position. And so we have more creative. You probably know Matilda Adim. If you don't, you should get to know her. She is amazing and awesome. And she is one of the creative minds that I'm talking about, involved in generating accommodation ideas that meet the need of staff members and the department. And I just want to close by saying that I'm often asked what my vision and goals are as director of EDD, and I know that I'm supposed to have a long, detailed answer. And to be honest, I don't. What I really want people to know is that even though EDD has had challenges and does lots of things, quote unquote, wrong, there are so many things that we do right. And I really want to focus on the things that we do right and fix the things that we do wrong. So may you live and may you wear it out. Thank you for your time. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Really appreciate the very touching story about your mom. And we can relate to that. You're talking to a group of people that's certainly associated with that. Our identity is not our disability, but a whole person who we are, as unique to, what we do and what we say and what our characteristics are. So thank you for bringing that up. I also like your quote is, when you know about a challenge, there is no excuse not to fix it. I wish we could broadcast this philosophy all the way across state departments. Will be a much nicer organization. Anyway, my question to you is that you have a lot of people, and you touched on this, teleworking, and they've got equipment and so on. How are you accommodating employees who are actually have some disabilities, but working from home and needing that reasonable accommodation? An example would be, sit down, stand up desk, or a chair, or ergonomic keyboard, mouse, whatever. So how is EDD handling that aspect of the challenge, if it's a challenge at all?
That's a great question. And as far as I know, and I did, we have had these conversations throughout the pandemic, we are accommodating in every which way that we can. And so I have not heard, and I would, from Local 1000, I have not heard from Miss Irene Green, I have not heard many, if any, complaints about that. I think that, like the rest of the world, the pandemic hit and we shut down basically within days, and started working from home. And so we did have challenges, of course, at first. We just don't have the equipment to have people. Most everybody has a desktop and not a laptop, right? So, we had some challenges there, and we hired, of course, 5,000 people during the pandemic. But, I think that we have been as, I don't want to use the word accommodating, but we have done the best that we can to accommodate everyone. And I think if someone needed something, we got it to them.
Thank you. My next question is, I see that on a chat. Let's see. There was a question about how I realize that you're relatively new to EDD. I just want to ask if you have a plan to attend any of the EDD DAC meetings personally in future. So as you know, DAC is mandated by Government Code 19795B. Each entity must have a DAC, and their job is to advise someone like yourself, the executive director or the chief executive of any entity. So the question that this came up is, would you be interested in attending any of their meetings?
I would be happy to.
Great. That answers that question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I never say no to a party. Come on.
That's good. That's good to know that. I also understand that due to the pandemic, EDD experienced an increased volume of unemployment claims, and it responded to this surge by hiring several limited terms employees. Are these limited term employee position will convert to a permanent position to maintain a satisfactory level of service?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we unfortunately, we are federally funded by claim. EDD is for the UI system. So when the number of claims go down, which they have, one piece of that being the federal pandemic unemployment assistance is no longer available, right? That was the people that did not, in a nutshell, have wages and were basically the gig economy people. So now that our funding has gone down, we do not have the funding to hire every single person, but we are actually, I think this just happened yesterday or the day before, that we are planning on, going out with the job duty statements and hiring as many people as we can from that limited term list, because as you can imagine, to your point, Bobby, about still getting through the claims, although the pandemic is over and we're in the endemic stage, EDD is still operating under a pandemic because we do have a lot of work that was sort of shifted to make room for priorities of paying claimants. So now we do have that back work that we have to do. And it just makes the most sense for us, and our unemployment insurance deputy, Grecia Staton, is absolutely amazing. And, she is going to be converting some of those limited term into permanent intermittents or full-time as the funding allows.
Thank you. And you mentioned that is the plan, to convert some of these positions into a permanent position. From this temporary list or limited term employee list, are you considering people who have a LEAP certification? Are they given any consideration to that extent?
So I don't know I would say yes. I mean, I will ensure that is the case. I have not heard that was not the case. So I know that we internally, we had the conversation. It's been a while now, but we have had a conversation about LEAP. And I think we are, as I mentioned, one of the top departments. And, we have a lot of staff too. So I do appreciate that. But we certainly, if there is a good employee who was temporary with us during the pandemic, we have no problem in hiring that person. I will say that.
So how would they go about advocating for themselves if they're temporary and on LEAP list and they have had no disciplinary issues, got satisfactory, evaluation and so on? How would they go about, taking up on that opportunity?
So I can get back to you, but I do believe that there was an internal only to EDD job application that went out. So I encourage them all to apply.
Okay, great. That answers the question. And the purpose of me talking about this LEAP is, I know you mentioned that EDD is like, one of the major departments that has a lot of folks. You're familiar with the Parity Report that CalHR publishes, right?
I haven't seen it in a while, but I am familiar with it. Yes.
And I'm not going to hold you responsible for not meeting parity because that was before your time.
Okay, thank
But
you.
the Parity Report indicates in a nutshell that you should have or try to have a composition of 16.6% of your workforce as persons with disabilities.
Mhm.
Last report that I looked at, unless I'm wrong, that was dated end of December 12/31/2021 at 10.6%. So is there a plan to bridge that gap in meeting that parity?
Looks like we have work to do, Bobby. It's
And
a challenge that again, like I said, we have no excuse not to fix it. Now that we know about it, I have no excuse not to fix it, and you can hold me to that.
great. I will hold you to that then. Thank you so much, Nancy. One other question I have for you is, plans lie ahead of EDD for improving is technology infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I was just writing down that I made a commitment to you there on that. So
Just take your time.
So I'm sorry, repeat your question if you wouldn't mind.
The question is, what plans do you have for improving the infrastructure, technology infrastructure for EDD, both for the claimants as well as the employees and overall good of the organization, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. You probably all know that, during sort of the height of the pandemic, the governor created an EDD strike team made up of GovOps and Department of Technology and a couple of outside entities, including also and some employees here at EDD. And when the report came out, one of the things that they had suggested was to pause the benefits modernization system technology project that we had that was sort of slowly making its way to fruition, and basically asked us to take a look at that again, because one of the concerns is that it was not only not employee friendly, but probably, it was not claimant friendly, but also probably not employee friendly either. So we did that. We are in the process of doing that. And you will see if you had any opportunity to read the January 10th budget that the governor puts out, we will have a proposal in the May revision for we call it the technology project, but it's much more than technology. It is a way that we are going to modernize our DI, UI, PFL, some of our tax branch systems into as modern as can be tool that will be claimant friendly, employee friendly, just better for EDD, better for the citizens of California, better for everybody.
Great. Thank you. I have a question from the chat. And again, you may or may not be able to respond to this in this particular specific situation. The question is, if I do have a disability, could it be a reasonable justification for hardship transfer?
So I am not equipped to answer that question, but I would be happy if this person works at EDD, I would be happy. They could send me an email and I'd be happy to forward it on that to someone who could. Great.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Do we have any other questions for Nancy? I don't want to take up the whole time asking her questions.
So Bobby, as you know, I have a question. So Nancy, hi.
Hi.
My name is Susan Turnquist, and I'm actually an EDD employee. I work on the IT side of the house.
Nice.
And I'm also, as a part of SDAC, I'm our secretary here as a part of SDAC, and I'm a part of our DAC at EDD. So I want to actually ask your opinion, because there's a question that comes up every time we talk about having a successful disability advisory committee.
Mm-hmm.
So the deal is that, every agency is required to have a disability advisory committee. It has an EEO officer, which often acts as a liaison to the directorate side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made up of staff. like people with disabilities or advocates that are interested in disability. I consider myself both of those things. And the big answer we get whenever we're talking to ACSED or even amongst ourselves of how do you have a successful DAC, which I know successful is kind of a vague word, but how do we have a DAC that gets things done or gets involved or reaches the goal that we're trying to of informing the directorate about disability issues? The answer comes up of like, you need to have an engaged directorate. They need to be actively involved. Well, as someone at a staff level, I'm like, it's a really great suggestion, but how do we do that? How do we get the director? How do we get the directorate on board? How do we make sure that we're giving the directorate the things that will like actually float to up in their pile? I know this is kind of a vague, and so I'm asking your opinion and your advice because I think EDD, we have a pretty good path of getting things through the EEO officer, but I know that every DAC is wondering that same thing. How do we engage the director? How do we make sure that they care about our stuff and that our stuff gets paid attention to? Because as activists, advocates, we want our stuff to make traction. Mm-hmm. So that's my big question for you. Do you have any advice?
That's a great question. And as I mentioned, I believe that EDD is a little different than other departments where the EEO office actually sits in the director's office. So Matilda, who's our EEO officer, reports directly to me, and we meet like you would with any other of your staff.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think that it is a matter of that, and also a matter of priorities in the director's office. And as I mentioned, and it sounds like, Susan, you probably know who Matilda is. She is very, very, very dedicated to her job and to EDD and doing the right thing. And I think that is all helpful. And not to say that others weren't, I'm just saying that she's, we talk a lot about things that we could do better. And, to my colleagues at CalHR, understanding sometimes it costs money, and we don't know, we don't have just an influx of money, at the department level. But you should bring it to Matilda's attention. She can bring it to my attention. You have my email. You can figure out my email. I put it in the chat. I'm happy to come to meetings, because I do understand that this is important. I mean, I can't come to every meeting because everybody, trust me, my day is full of meetings.
No, I totally understand. What are the things that how do things catch your attention and get resources? I mean, even not EDD specific, but in general, from a directorate perspective. Because I guess what I'm asking you is your opinion and your perspective as someone who is high up in the food chain. I know you're busy. I know you've got a million things coming at you. And then we're down here, this little bitty group of people at any agency trying to say, disability issues. How can we make things better and different?
Okay, so I have to stop you, because these little bitty people, that is, I don't want to hear that.
Okay, thank you.
You guys run the department. Let's be clear. I ask people to do things for me nicely. You actually do the work and run the department. So we'll stop there on that one. But I will say that if, again, I mean, if it gets to Matilda's attention, and Matilda brings it to my attention, you have my attention. You can also send me an email. I read all my emails, as crazy as that is. I do read all my emails.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Nancy. We appreciate your input.
Of
here.
course.
Debbie, I don't think we have any more in the chat. We have one. What are the steps EDD has taken to get LEAP hires from Veronica? Because you were saying that we've been really successful in getting LEAP hires.
And I believe that she's going to get back to us on that as a follow-up. Are there any other questions apart from that on chat, or if anybody wishes to unmute and ask a question, now's the time. Before Nancy gets busy attending other St. Patty's parties that's happening out there.
Only if I was in Boston.
Bobby, I see Catherine's hand up.
All right.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, Nancy. Catherine Campisi from ACSED.
Hi.
I wanted to know if you know if there are any explicit plans as you enter this technology study to ensure that the new systems, both for employees and customers, are fully accessible to people with disabilities. I don't know if you know, but if the system is not designed from the ground up to be accessible to, for example, people that use screen readers or other devices, that it's virtually impossible to retrofit it. So, you know, a few years ago, the state auditor did a big report. Departments were very deficient in some of those areas. So do you know if accessibility is a built-in factor in that study?
So I am going to just guess on that, and I am going to say yes. And I will tell you why I am going to say yes, but that is a very good point that you bring up, and I will make sure that that is part of it. Part of the BSM, the reimagining the business system modernization project, there is a big claimant and stakeholder and employee aspect to it. There's actually like a whole not department, but a whole like little unit that's going to be focused on just making sure that it is user friendly, I guess is the simple way to say it. So I am certain that that is part of it, but I will certainly double check on that.
Thank you. And, you know, I apologize for the gardener in the yard, but it's really important to have testers who are people with disabilities who use assistive technology, because a lot of times companies will say, oh yeah, it's accessible, but I would really encourage you, because it's very costly and almost impossible if it's not done from the ground up.
Could not agree more. Thank you
very much. Okay.
Thank you, Nancy. Really appreciate your participation. You've been very generous with your time. And again, you know, I don't want to keep you from attending all those parties out there. So great work in presenting a wealth of information. This is why we have these meetings, so we can share this wealth of knowledge that you shared with us, with our members. So thank you again, and please come back and see us soon.
You just invite me, you say the word. It was good to see you, Bobby, and thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me.
All right.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.